Ciao a tutti! Hello everybody, welcome back to Felinésse. I'm your host, Melissa Mezzalira, CatsEssentials founder, and today we're uncovering one of the most powerful drivers of our cat's overall well-being, something that rarely really gets the attention it deserves, the gut microbiome. And to guide us through this fascinating topic, I'm thrilled to have Dr. Holly Ganz here with us. Dr. Ganz is a microbial ecologist and chief science officer at Animal Biome. She co-founded the company almost a decade ago to bring microbiome science directly into pet care. Her work is helping cats live longer, healthier lives through better understanding of the microbes that live with them. Holly, thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, thank you for having me, Melissa.
You're very welcome. So I would love to start with you and ask you what led you into this world of studying feline microbiome and what decided to build Animal Biome.
Well, what led me to the feline microbiome is that I had worked on wildlife actually before I started to think about cats and dogs and studying disease in Africa, in Southern Africa. And I got interested in the microbiome and I wanted to know how it might differ between cats and dogs and hyenas and other animals. So I got into it from that perspective and I started working on the cheetah microbiome and I got samples from other cats too. And I came to understand through actually the cheetah work that there's an importance for how they feed that affects the microbiome, right? Like giving them the whole carcass but also that the microbiome is co-evolved with different animals. And so like probiotics that like you and I take might not be the same ones that your cat needs. So I came in it from more of an academic science perspective.
Wow. So was that during your PhD program?
Actually, it was afterwards. I stayed as
Oh.
a research scientist for a while after my PhD.
Wow, that is so fascinating. So I think that a lot of cat parents actually heard about microbiome by now, but they might not really know really mean. So for anyone listening, how would you describe the gut microbiome the simplest way you can so everybody can understand it and why it is so important for everybody? In this case, we're talking about cats.
I like to think that everybody knows about the microbiome, but of course, it's still new for most of us. So basically, we all have bacteria living in and on us, and especially in our digestive tracts. And this is a community of bacteria and other microorganisms that basically live in and on us, and they help to, in the gut, play really important roles, not just in digestion, which of course is critical, but they help to train the immune system so that it knows how to like protect us against bad things that might come in with our food. And some of them make neurotransmitters. There's just many different roles. So people like to talk about like the gut skin connection, the gut brain connection. It's just the more we look, the more we understand that this community is really foundational for health, but it's something that 100 years ago we didn't realize. And when we were in the like antibiotics generation and that was life-saving and changed medicine. But now I think we're in this new shift where we realize, okay, not all bacteria are bad. Some of them are really, really important. And we need to protect and feed them.
Right. And I think that's what is, I loved learning how the microbiome actually affects so much more than digestion, because I think every time we think about gut, we think about, digestive system, but it kind of influences everything from, immunity, even behavior, their longevity. So it's really at the center of their health. So can you explain how these microbes play such a big role throughout the body?
Well, it turns out that 70% of the immune cells in our bodies occur in the gut. And so there's a really clear connection between the immune system and our gut microbiome. And it makes sense, right? Because we're bringing things into our body and we need to be protected against having, bacteria go into our bloodstream and multiply, right? We're full of nutrients and resources for them. And so there's just a lot of close interactions happening there. There are bacteria that eat the mucus lining in the gut. There are bacteria that help to promote its growth and recovery. They're bacteria that feed the intestinal cells. And so there's just a lot of, as we said, many close connections that we hadn't really considered before. I like to think about it as like an ecosystem in our gut.
Right. That's a good way to put it. And what are the most common gut-related issues that you're seeing in cats today? And do you think that these are becoming more common?
Right. So I think I should have mentioned when you were asking me how I got into cats. In 2015, I did a Kickstarter to raise funding to study the microbiome, the gut microbiome of pet cats. And what I learned, and part of that was I wanted to see how do they compare to their wild cousins. And also I just wanted people to know, hey, this is important and maybe it could be useful to you. And what I ended up learning more from the people who supported that maybe than they did for me. I mean, I told them about bacteria. I don't know if it was helpful, but they told me that a lot of them had a cat who had a digestive problem, and some of them had terrible diarrhea. And they really said, please help us because everything that we're doing right now isn't working. They're at the end of the rope. I had one person who I think was thinking about like abandoning her cat. It turns out a lot of cats can end up in shelters if they have these chronic problems.
Mm.
And I hadn't even considered, like, when my sister was in college, she got this beautiful Persian cat from someone because she had chronic diarrhea and they didn't want her anymore. And we didn't know how
Oh,
to deal with that, right? Like what to do. And so what I realized when I looked at the microbiome results was that a lot of them were really out of balance, missing a lot of important gut bacteria. And so that's when I was suggesting, oh, hey, maybe you should get a fecal transplant from your veterinarian. Because they were like, I don't really care what the names of all these bacteria are. I just want my cat to not have diarrhea.
right. And do you feel that the fecal transplant is becoming popular with the veterinarians?
It is definitely growing. I would say that I've also learned that there's some things you can do before a fecal transplant to help. Like, I'm a really big fan of the yeast-based probiotic Saccharomyces boulardii, and it can really help with diarrhea. And then once things are better supported, then I think you can do a fecal transplant to recolonize these gut bacteria, many of which are super susceptible to antibiotics. And so they may not have gotten them from mom, or if they may have had them when they were young, but then, along the way they got sick and had to take antibiotics. And I think we're just now realizing how much that can harm the gut.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that because I wanted to ask you what usually tends to throw off the cat's microbiome. So I was thinking antibiotics, but could it be also diet changes, stress, or even environmental factors?
Yes, all of that. So I think that also feeding, like, you can imagine, like feeding like the same dry diet every day for 10 years is probably not going to be a great way to support diversity in the gut. So it can be hard, right? If you've got a pet with GI condition, to rotate the food, right? But that's kind of what you need to support a diversity of gut bacteria. So you have to figure out how to get the diarrhea under control so you can actually do some of these other things to support more rich community and have it be more resilient to things like stress.
Right. And so, what are some early signs? Because, okay, maybe one could be obviously diarrhea, or if we see something that is off when the cat to the bathroom. But are there any other early signs that cat parents should be aware of? Because I know it's always difficult to, with cats to know when they're not feeling well because they're so good on hiding pain or anything that's going on. But are there any early signs that maybe we don't think about that could actually be a signal that something is happening in their gut?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that people sort of report their cats starting to crouch, like if there's having like GI distress, some cats they become more reclusive and they can kind of crouch and they become less playful.
Mm,
Depends on the individual how they handle it, but and then of course there's things like constipation, excess, like hairballs. Difficulty passing hairballs is also one thing because the motility of the gut is important for having the hairball move through. And then of course things like soft stool, diarrhea are also obvious signs, but also
right.
some of them also have like vomiting as
Oh,
well.
vomiting is a sign too. Oh, okay.
I mean, some is normal. That's the thing. Like the occasional soft stool
Yeah.
is normal, right? But then when it becomes chronic, or like starts to happen a lot, then there's something off.
Right, right. And so you have a wonderful gut health test that helps understanding what's going on inside our cat's system. So I wanted to ask you, how does it work, and what does it make it different from what we might get from our regular vet? For example, when we take our stool sample to the veterinarian, what is the difference with the animal biome test and the regular vet visit?
Right. This is a great question. So Yeah, we're used to taking the stool sample to the vet, and then they will look for things like parasites and, tapeworm, other parasites and pathogens. But they don't tend to look for things like they'll look for C. perfringens or they'll look for C. diff, but they won't look for E. coli because they think that E. coli is normal in stool. But what we found is in cats and dogs, like having a lot of E. coli is not normal and should be included in those panels, but they haven't come to recognize that yet. But the biggest difference is that we're really looking at for beneficial bacteria, these members of the gut microbiome that play beneficial roles, like they produce these anti-inflammatory compounds or they help to break down food. They are not included in those parasite and pathogens tests because for a long time, we microbiologists just focused on the nasty ones, the pathogens. And it's more recent that people have started to think about beneficial bacteria. So we look for the good ones. And then what you want to have is enough of them so that the system is balanced. Because even a normal inhabitant of the gut can become a problem. We call them a pathobiont or like a frenemy, like E. coli. It's normal to have E. coli, right? But it should be only a small percentage. It shouldn't be like the whole thing in your gut. And if you start to have a lot of it, it's irritating and it's actually pro-inflammatory. But when it has its competitors around, it actually is kept in check. And so it may play important roles, but it needs to be sort of kept under control by other bacteria.
Right. I think what I loved about your test is actually that it's, you send everything home and then you basically, you do it yourself, which, that shows how much we love our cats because it's not really fun to go and pick up
Sure.
a stool sample. But I think it's very convenient. And so once you get the results back, what kind of information does the report give you and what cat parents can learn from this test that they won't probably hear during a vet appointment?
That's right. So, I mean, actually, the test really grew out of that Kickstarter project. So, it was at home, like I sent you supplies and you collect a sample at home and mail it back to us, and we will like characterize it in our lab using current like technology that's sort of state of the art for people and pets. And yeah, in the beginning, people were like, well, who wants to handle their pet's poop? But pet parents, we handle their poop every day, right? It's just part of doing that. And we also study it, right? We want to know if everything's okay because they can't tell us how they're feeling, right? But if their poop is a weird color, if it's really soft or whatever, we notice. So yeah, you send the sample into us and then within 2 weeks, you'll get results and we provide it online. So you can look at it through our web app. And then you can also download a report if you want to share it with someone. And there's a link too if you want to share it with your veterinarian. And yeah, basically we say does it look balanced or not? Do they have pathogens like that we can detect a bunch of pathogens and that you might be concerned about that? I mean, like you don't need to freak out, like this is normal. And there's supplements that can help deal with some of them. And then also we make recommendations like, okay, for how to improve the amount of good bacteria in the gut. Like adding a little bit of fiber can be good because like some pets that are fed a raw diet, which are great, sometimes it doesn't have enough fiber for my cat might need a little bit more than yours. And so adding a little bit can help. And, people talk about whether or not pets need fiber, but we have shown that adding a little bit of fiber can definitely help with the constipation and diarrhea. A little bit, not too much, and it also can help to support bacteria in the gut's food for the bacteria, but it also can solidify stool. And then we have we try to make it actionable because that's what I learned when I did that first study was the people were like, I just want to solve the problem, right? I need to know what to do. And I didn't just pick up this poop, for no reason. And so we try as much as possible to make the insights clear and actionable so that you know what to do. And we also have a team of microbiome health advisors who will do a free consultation. And so you can better understand what the results mean and how you might be able to add some things to help improve things.
Right. And so when you mention fibers, what do you recommend? Like, what are some natural source of fibers that we can add to our cat's food?
Oh, yeah. I mean, so even just like, I mean, it depends on what your cat likes. And like we have a fiber blend, but you can add, flaxseed or like there's many different things that you can add. You can add a little bit of vegetable. I know that cats are obligate carnivores, but and some people like to add inulin, I mean, psyllium husk. There's a whole range of things that you can do. Some people put like dandelion leaves or add a little spinach. I mean, some cats may not like it, but So you have to figure out what they'll do well with. And then there's if you're like some people like, oh, fur and feathers, right? But those are harder to get, right? But that's normal. Like if they had caught a mouse and eaten it, they would have eaten the whole carcass. And then they would get all these other things in there and not just eating the muscle meat.
Right. So when you do this kind of test, you basically are able to find out what bacteria are missing or what are overrepresented. And then basically with this supplementation, you're able to kind of restore the balance in the gut. Is that how it works?
That's right. Yes. So we make recommendations. And in addition to like some dietary things, like sometimes we recommend that maybe you need to feed a little more protein. And there's lots of ways to, add some little bit of fish on top or whatever. There's lots of ways to add protein. We also recommend like, okay, so they're having a lot of diarrhea and their E. coli levels are normal. So then we recommend something like the Aspergillosis probiotic, which is actually really, I've done a lot of work to show that it actually helps with these signs and then doesn't compete with the good bacteria that should be living in the gut.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have actually the most, I think, gold standard thing that we offer is the Gut Restore, which is an oral fecal transplant capsule. And the reason we have that is because these gut bacteria that are so important for health aren't in probiotics today, but we have found a way to stabilize them and put them into a capsule that looks like any other probiotic, but it's not because it's got hundreds of different kinds of bacteria in there that are important for cat health. And then we do have a new product that we haven't really told anyone about yet. And
Oh.
it's called Gut Rebuild. And it actually has one of the most important gut bacteria for cats in it. It's a blend that includes that Aspergillosis, and then it also includes some little viruses that knock back E. coli. So it's a bit of a combination that we think can really help some of those cats that have had either older cats who've had antibiotics, have some of these GI conditions. We think it's super helpful.
Oh, wow. You have it's kind of like almost like a custom selection of supplements based on what the condition of the cat is.
That's right. That's right.
Yes. Okay, wonderful. And so once the balance is restored, what kind of improvements can we see in our cats, in their health, on the way they act, they behave?
Yeah, I know people report that their cats become happier and more playful and more affectionate. I think if you're not feeling good, right, then it's harder to do all those things. Sometimes they're losing a lot of weight because if the gut isn't processing food well, it's hard to get the nutrients you need. So they can either, if they're underweight, sometimes they'll gain weight, and vice versa. Sometimes you can have a metabolic disorder where they become really overweight because of some problem in the gut. And so having them shift to a more healthy weight is also something that can happen.
Wow, that's nice. And usually, how long does it take before people can see meaningful changes or, starting to see some results?
I mean, I also don't want to like oversell and that these are hard problems, right? The body is complicated. It does depend on like the underlying cause of these things that we don't always know. So if they're young and they just like, so for example, my veterinarian was one of the first to do this, and she had a young cat who just his stool didn't firm up appropriately, and she didn't think he got the right stuff from mom. And so for him, it was like only took a couple weeks and he was set.
Oh,
But
wow.
if you've had a cat that's had issues like this for years,
Yeah.
the rule of thumb they say is like sort of the longer they've been having the problem, the longer it's going to take. And I mean, sometimes it does take a couple years, and but what else are you going to do? It's just you have to do the best for them and keep trying. And so we try to come up with strategies to really minimize, how often you need to do things. But some individuals, like, so yeah, 80% of the time, I think it's like it works and they don't have to keep doing things. But there are these like edge cases where sometimes they have to keep supporting them for the long haul.
Right.
And some individuals, like, you sort of do the best you can, but you're never going to fix everything.
Yeah. But I mean, as long as, something is improving,
Yeah,
we all want to see our cats happy and healthy.
great. Great.
Yes. And so for someone who wants to support their cat's gut health naturally at home, what are a few simple things they can start doing today?
Well, I mean, the obvious things, right, of course, are like make sure you give them regular fresh water. I know some cats don't. And also, I think it's important to have them have the exposure to sunshine. If you can have a catio or if you let them outside, I think it's that all has been, shown to help also. Like it's good to get exposed to soil and fresh air. And so I know that in a lot of us live in places where they can't go hunting, right? Like it's not ideal, or like I live in a city, so my cat used to catch mice and rats and stuff. It was a little scary. So it's a little bit of the Florence Nightingale approach, right? It's health, I think, does depend on having good outdoor time if you can. Playing with them, exercise actually helps to support the gut. I think, well, there's probably different schools of thought, but from my perspective, I think you should just feed them at meal times and not have them free feed all the time. I think it's better for several reasons, including for the gut. So how often you feed them can affect things. There's some thought that once a day is better, but my animals always demand it twice a day. So I do that for meals, but you can play with that and see what works best, for you. And then I guess, of course, keeping the litter box clean, right? That's really important. And then feed the diet is, I think, maybe the number one thing is, making sure that you feed them a good diet.
Right. Yeah, those are all very important points. Yes. Thank you for sharing that. And so, where do you see microbiome-based care heading in the future? Like, do you think they will become part of like a standard veterinary care?
I hope so. I think that it allows us to be more proactive about their health and identify problems before they become a chronic condition. So we can detect these kinds of imbalances, and there are a number of health conditions that are associated with them. And so if we can nip things in the bud, I think then we're more likely to be able to rebalance and recolonize the gut in a helpful way. Right. But if it goes on for years and you can't see it, then you can fix it, but it's harder. I think more and more veterinarians are realizing that they can reach for something like Espulardi before antibiotics, but in the past, that was kind of the go-to. And so trying to reduce the harm that is caused to the gut to begin with is also really, really helpful. And I see that change happening already.
Right. And I think it also starts from us, from cat parents, because in that case, we can also ask our veterinarian, to be involved if we decide to do this test and, be more educated about what's happening inside our cats. So we kind of, we don't always have to wait for the veterinarian to suggest something. I think the more we learn ourselves, the more we can be proactive in our pet's health. So that's why we're sharing this episode. So more and more cat parents are aware of the possibilities that are out there. So on that note, if there is one thing that you wish every cat parent understood about gut health, what would that be?
I think that it's really important for your cat to have a full diversity of bacteria in the gut. And these bacteria are beneficial and play really important roles in their health and well-being. And you can support them, first and foremost by feeding them a good diet and investing in that, because then you're investing in their future.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Obviously their diet is extremely important. There are a lot of other factors, like you mentioned earlier, too, that influence their gut, but that's definitely one important start. So, Holly, thank you so much for joining me today. I think your work is making such a meaningful difference in the lives of cats. And I know the cat parents are going to walk away with a completely new understanding of how important the microbiome truly is. And so to anyone turning in, thank you for joining us on Felinésse. If you want to explore the microbiome testing or learn more, be sure to check out the Animal Biome resources. Holly, what is the website?
Animalbiome.com.
Okay, great. We'll share that on the notes as well. And don't forget to follow or subscribe and share this episode with other parents who could benefit from this information. And I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.